All right, so in the last video, we looked at 3 different ways we could start our sketching. To start off our digital painting with a rotoscoped sketch using a pressure-sensitive brush. So it's a soft pressure size brush of the general brushes on top of a rotoscoped photograph, right? The problem with that is it's limited to just one reference. Any of the flaws in the reference, like his eyes closed, is going to be traced and used. The freehand puts it a little bit more in your hand, in your style, but might not get the proportions exactly right, but those can be worked with as you paint. And then the shape sketch, which uses just big shapes of paint rather than lines to kind of block things down. Now, how do we go from here? Well, what do you build on top of your sketch? You build your base color. So if I lock all of these, I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call it base color. It's like flatting in digital color. But for base color, I don't typically want to use this kind of brush. Because this brush, especially when you look at it at full resolution, looks very kind of airbrushy, very digital. Doesn't have kind of the tactile quality I want from my work. The other thing I want to set up before I do my base color layer is I want to make sure I'm painting at the right resolution. Because the base color can be soft and low res, but anything I do on top of that, from this shape painting on forward or from a linear sketch on forward, you want to make sure is at full resolution. So I go to image size, and I make sure that it's at least 8 by 10 inches by at least 300 pixels per inch. Now, if you're having trouble fitting your reference in there, I like having this reference, but I don't like that my painting overlaps with it, then you just put guides around your intended pixel frame, and then go to image canvas size and expand it. So I'm going to grow it from this corner. Actually, I'll grow it from the center. And I'm going to make it 14 inches by 18 inches. Just going to grow it out on all sides. Right? Then I can unlock and move my reference. So it's not overlapping my painting anymore. Right? Also, when I do my base painting layer, I'm kind of choosing my colors. I don't need to be limited to just the colors in my reference, because the colors in my reference are kind of sad. So I'm going to bring my other references here, and then I might bring in additional references that I can steal colors from now that I have more space. So I was interested in using this William de Kooning painting, who was one of the most famous painters in America before Andy Warhol, just 10 years before, in an abstract expressionist movement. This is from the Brooklyn Museum. It shows how William de Kooning kind of built up his paintings. He would use tar and wax. And I want really kind of wild colors. So I downloaded that, and I'm going to bring that into my Photoshop as additional reference. Something kind of out there, right? To free me up a little bit. I'm going to rasterize it, and I'm going to say image autotone, and maybe even image adjustments, levels, brighten it up a little. You can also play with direct adjustments to fix your reference photo. So if I rasterize that, image autotone, adjustments, I can brighten it up a little bit, increase the contrast, then maybe go to image adjustments, hue saturation, saturate it a little bit, and then pull out the cyans and the blues, heighten those, and the greens. There aren't a lot of, because this is just Polaroid film. So I can also go to Image Adjustment, Color Balance, my favorite, and get rid of some of that yellowish that's kind of going through it. Even though I'm not going for a representational look, I want to have it be more fun and more abstracted. It helps to work with your reference. So if you see it from before, it looked like that. Now it looks a lot cleaner. So from that to this, right? And that's just going to help me with my painting. References matter. Now, what's next? So let's say I'm going to work on the rotoscoped layer. I lock all of these. Most of them will get turned off by the time I'm done, right? The only layer that would stay would be the shape sketch, if that was my first step, right? And basically what I'm going to do with my base color layer is, it's a phase I call kill whitey. We just got to get rid of all these whites and replace them with the colors of our choice. I call it kill whitey so you remember it. So maybe I'll even put base color dash kill whitey. All right, so we can kill whitey with any brush, but if we use a boring brush at 100% opacity, then we're going to get a boring edge, right, as we replace this color. So let's make a custom brush. Instead of fiddling around with all the pre-built-in dry brushes, wet brushes, with downloading them from the internet, which you can do and try to modify them, the easiest way to understand how a brush works is just to make one yourself. So this is how we make a brush. I'm going to save my work here, and we're going to see how the brush I make is going to be a whole lot more interesting than this, right? Which is just one of the general brushes. And I'm going to say File New, a new Photoshop file. This is for making a brush. I'm going to call it Karl Brush. Since I'll do it also in the afternoon, I'll call it Karl Brush Morning, Spring 25. And I'm going to make it in pixels, 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. That's what I like to design for a brush. Doesn't matter the resolution because you're defining the pixels. Say create, that's a 1,000 by 1,000 pixel grid. You're going to click on your defaults. So let me get out of full screen here so you can really see it clearly in the video. The default colors are here. This little box above your foreground background color. Click on it so black is on the foreground and it's a solid black. Now I'm going to make my brush pressure sensitive, right? But pretty small. And I'm going to make a brush that I want to match what's called a bristle brush, the kind of brush that William de Kooning used. Bristle brushes are made of hog's hair. Not that kind of brush. Paintbrush. For artists, not for hair. Right, so these are bristle brushes. Really stiff hair. These are flat, kind of square brushes. So when a bristle brush, I'm just going to draw it for you quickly. This is the brush. Square head. When you turn it on its side, it's thinner, right? Does that make sense? And they're pretty stiff hairs, so they make like little stamps. So what kind of mark would that make if you turned that brush and stamped it right onto this square? That is what you want to draw. And you want to draw it at an angle, like a 45-degree angle. So this brush is going to leave little slashes, this bristle brush, in a rectangle that's kind of turned at 45 degrees from end to end. So what I'm doing with my basic brush is showing when you push that bristle brush against a black ink pad and then stamp it straight down, zoomed in on this 1,000 by 1,000 pixel white square, what kind of marks will it leave? It might have slight, like, flyaways. And then I can vary the size just slightly. Remember, at 100% opacity. And then something like that. That will give me a bristle brush. A round brush would give you more like a circle. Okay? Now, how do I turn that into a brush? I go to Edit, and I say, Preset. They've changed it a little bit. Huh. They used to have something, oh, there it is. Yeah. Define brush preset right here. Define brush preset. You click that. All of a sudden, you've created a brush. It will have the name that you named the file. Karl Brush Morning Spring 2025. Say OK. Now you can play with that brush. To play with it, I recommend deleting everything. Command A, delete, fill it with white. And now the problem is, when you use a brush, I have the stamp, right? But if I actually use it like a brush, that's what it looks like. But it's all locked at the same angle, right? So it looks very artificial. So now we understand brush settings. So this is the brush shape. Now we have to determine the brush settings. To do that, we can open it up in Window, Brush Settings. It's also in your sidebar right here. And the most helpful one to work with, we're going to keep it pretty simple, is Shape Dynamics, the one at the top. It's just like if you're doing layer styles, this is how you modify your brush. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of size jitter. That means each time I stamp the brush, it will be a slightly different size. If I do a huge size jitter, because it will only vary within 12%. If I do it like this, then that size jitter is going to be really crazy. But you don't want that. This is to make it more like a mechanical brush. So I'm going to do just a slight size jitter. Then I'm going to play with minimum diameter. And then I'm going to play, most importantly, with angle jitter. That means each time I use that brush, it will be at a slightly different angle. So now, it's going to give me a much more believable fill and texture. All right? The other thing that really helps is the control. I want to make it based on pin pressure. So the lighter I press, the smaller it is. The heavier I press, the bigger it is. I'm going to take my angle jitter down just a little bit. And then there's roundness jitter, which can help with your edge control. So now if I actually make the brush not 1,000 by 1,000 pixels, but instead make it more like what I would use, and I play with it, you'll see how beautiful this texture is. And that's at 100% opacity. And then if you play with colors, you'll see that this brush is going to give me a lot more of that interesting texture I want, especially when I'm using it at lower opacities. Okay. Now, some digital painters like to create tons and tons of custom brushes. All you have to do to save that brush is to use that brush. So it will show up at the end of your brushes, whatever new one you defined, but for each Photoshop file you go into, you're going to have to define its presets. So just this helps you remember it. And you can play with these for any brush. All right. And we're just going to use shape dynamics. Keep smoothing on just because it's the default. But now as I do my base color layer, my kill whitey layer, right? I'm going to use it at 100%. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to steal some of these more interesting colors.